healthy. I want to talk to you today about 4 principles. Again, I know there's more, but I'm going to give you just 4 principles of how we can, quote, maximize our time by limiting life's stressors. These are things. I'm on a journey. I'm just talking out of my life. These are principles that I've been living the last 3 years. It's not something that's theoretical to me. It's something that I'm learning every day, how to live according to wisdom principles from Scripture. Number 1, learn to live from a place of rest. Friends, when it comes to stress and time management, the first thing is I want to encourage you to stop living so anxious, ramped up. Learn to live according to a place of rest and peace. Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7, Paul says, be anxious for nothing. Now, what if we really did that? Is that possible? Can I honestly say that in the last 24 hours, there has been nothing that we've been anxious about? Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, it'll guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. So Paul says, listen, learn not to be anxious. Well, how are we going to do it? I'm going to teach you in a moment. In other words, we've got to learn to let go of the nervousness in our life. We've got to learn to let go of some of those things that we've been fretting and fuming over. Some of those things that get us worked up. I was the type of person before my brown out where, man, I'd let anything stir me up. I get freaked out, upset. I let people know it. See, every time you get ramped up and freaked out, you're letting that adrenaline seep into your body, and it's not healthy. We were getting onto the plane, coming here, and again, I have my wife and I, my 2 girls. So I had the tickets, 4 tickets, and we get up to the ticket agent, and we get up, and I give him the 4 tickets, and he said, stop. I need every one of you, I want everybody to give their own personal ticket. You need everyone. Yes, I need to know I said, look, there's 4 of us. Here's the 4 tickets. Now, my old self, everybody say BC. Whatever that means. But anyway, it's actually BB, before burnout. But anyway, I would have been like, bro, what's up? How difficult is this? There's 4 tickets, 4 people. But I didn't do that because I'm growing in Jesus. I'm learning to not adrenalize and get freaked out. I went, okay. So here's this ticket for this person. Here, listen, I gave him the win. I walked down the little airplane thing and my daughter goes, you're really growing, Dad. You're really growing. You're really growing. Praise the Lord. Listen, road rage, all of that, adrenaline, people that are free. We live in a culture that's freaking out. Just know that every time you freak out, it costs you. You actually lose, you don't win. You give them a piece of your mind, and you also give away a piece of your soul. I'm learning how to live at rest. I'm learning how to be at peace. I know some of you guys that are leaders and some of you men and women, man, I'm not into that. Type A people, high capacity leader. I'm not talking about passivity. I'm talking about learning to live with rhythms and rest and peace where you don't freak out. How do you do it? Well, I'll give you one practical way to learn how to live in rest. It's learn to recognize God's work in your life by being still. Everybody say, be still. I'm used to being a pacer when I pray, so I'd walk around and pace, and I still do that, but I'm now retraining my soul to be still. So in the morning time, no texting, no writing notes, no emailing. There's a portion of my prayer time where I'm just still in the presence of God. And I'm going to tell you, if you're a hyper guy like me, and I'm real hyped up, I'm learning how to be at rest. If you're real hyperactive, that is like death to you to be still. It's like put me under the water and put me out of my misery. But I'm learning how to be still. Everyone say, be still. Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I'm God. See, the reality is sometimes we're hyped up and ramped up because we forget that God is really God and He's in control of our lives, and we've got to, quote, be in control. I remember the counselor told me, he says, you're going to have to put away the cape. What cape? The cape where you've got a big S on your shirt. I said, Steve? He said, no, Superman. What are we thinking? We've got to learn to be at rest. Let those things go. Let those agitations go. Your soul is worth it. Number one, learn to live from a place of rest. Number two, understand your margin. Every one of us is designed by God with limits, capacities, and boundaries. Every one of us. Even the Apostle Paul knew this in 2 Corinthians 10. Here's what he said. Listen to the Apostle Paul. We, however, will not boast beyond our measure, but within the limits, within the limits of the sphere which God appointed us. God gave him limits. A sphere which especially includes you. In other words, here's what Paul was saying. I have a sphere. I know my limitations. I know my boundaries. Paul understood. He understood he had limits. I want everybody to say this with me. Would you say this? Say, I am human. Humans have limits. Therefore, I have limits. Now, I know that's hard for some people to admit, but it's a reality. Another word for limits is capacity. Our capacity is our emotional, mental, it's our gifting, it's the capacity of our life to be able to produce, but we have a limit. Every one of us have limits. Pastor Josh, that was hard for me to admit. Guys, that was hard for me to admit. I prided myself on, man, I got a lot of energy. I can preach 5 services on the weekend live. And then I could do our 101, our membership from 5 to 9 o'clock on Sunday night. I got a lot of energy, man. I'm just wired differently, so I thought. By 6, 7 o'clock in our membership, man, I'm saying crazy things. Our team's holding up signs, you sound like a heretic, you don't even sound Christian. What was I doing? I was on adrenaline so long, and some of you know exactly what it's like. You get into that loopy zone, and you think it's kind of fun, but the reality is, I was transgressing my limits. I was going past my God design. God gave me limits. Everyone say limits. Okay, here's another word. You have a capacity. So, we all have a load we're carrying, and we have limits, our design. We all have a capacity, but we all are carrying a load. So the difference between our load, what we're carrying, and our limits, our capacity. The difference between the two is called our margin. If you're carrying less than your capacity, guess what? You have margin. If you're carrying more than your capacity, you're in an overdrawn condition. You have no capacity. You have no margin. You're withdrawn. You've taken more out of the bank than you've got in it. Every one of us have a certain emotional capacity. And I was taking more out. And that's why, listen, that's why in my soul knew it. Everybody else didn't at first. The reality is that marginless is hurry. Margin is calm. Marginless is anxiety. Margin is peace. Marginless is debt. Margin is surplus. I believe that marginless is the disease of the new millennium. Pastor, how do I get some margin back in my life? Learn to say no. Isn't that interesting? The first word we learn as a kid usually is no, and yet we forget about it. Every one of us need to learn to say no. What are we going to say no to? The many good things so that we can say yes to the best things. We're going to learn to say no to good things so that we can say yes to the God things. Now, let me just say right off the bat, we're not going to say no to church. Pastor, I just don't have time to come to church in the summertime because, no, time out. The reason why you don't have time is because you've been spending 28 hours per week in front of the TV screen. The reason why you don't have time for the best things is because you've been playing Angry Birds on your iPad. The reason why you don't have time for the best things is because you've been looking at Facebook. Let me say this respectfully. Who cares what grandma had for lunch 2 weeks ago? 3 people are convinced of that. The reality is that we waste time. All right, here it is. Some of you, to regain margin, you're going to have a technology boundary in your life. See, the goal is, number one, to be at rest. We're going to have to learn to be still before God. But number 2, to have margin, we're going to learn to say no to good things so that we can say yes to the best things. In my life as a pastor, this was a tough one because so much of my identity was rooted in the fact of things that I did. So I had to learn to say no to different boards that I was on. I said, man, I can't do that. And by the way, it cost me relationally. I had to learn to say no to some different engagements, different missions and preaching engagements. And by the way, it cost me relationally. See, the fact of the matter is that I'm not saying if you're going to live healthy that everybody's going to be excited all the time. I am saying if you contend for it, the result is your soul will be well off. You've got to learn to say no to the good things so you can say yes to the, say it, best things. Number 3, embrace your season. The wisest man that ever lived, King Solomon, he wrote this. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 to 3. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. What is Solomon saying here? Listen, here's what he's saying. There is an ebb and flow to life. There'll be busy seasons, there'll be slower seasons. There'll be building seasons, there'll be times to cut back. Listen, there is winter, spring, summer, and fall. There's a time to plant and there's a time to harvest. There's a time, even the agricultural world, we plant, then we water, then in the fall, the harvest. Then in the wintertime, it looks as though it's dormant, but things are actually happening underground. In my life, I had to learn the difference of seasons. I had to learn that maximum output, listen, if God never designed the ecological system and the agrarian world to always live in continual harvest, then why do I think as part of God's creation, albeit a human being, why do I think that I can live in continual harvest? There's times to plant and there's times to reap. There's times where there's heavy output. You've just had a baby. That's a lot of output. You're going back to college or graduate school. That's a lot of output. You're starting a business. That's a lot of output. But if you don't get into a healthy rhythm, if you don't get into a healthy cycle, even a businessman or woman, you know that. There's times of growth and then there's times to consolidate growth. There's times for your systems and your structures to catch up with your growth. Well, in our own soul, there's times of heavy output. And by the way, let me just say this. I am so grateful for this church. I'm so grateful that you guys allow Pastor Stovall and Carrie. Listen, you cannot imagine the output it takes for a pastor to build a big building and go at the level that he's gone. I'm so grateful that he is secure enough and the staff is healthy enough and that he, believes in you guys enough that he can take off some time in the summer to get renewed, refreshed, to get filled up again, to come back with fresh messages. Why? Because you can't always live in output.